Alright, so here's what's going to be our fourth and final bracelet. This one is just super simple. It is just a basic square knot and the half square knot spirals and beads. It's pretty straightforward, fairly simple. It's going to have a button at one end, a loop at the other end for the closure, so there's no additional jump rings or anything being added to it. And again, I'm using this is a vintage glass bead, well, vintage glass button, and I'm guessing this is from at least the 1920s, possibly a little bit older. Alright, and for the beads within the bracelet, I've got this is a ceramic bead. It's out of my stash, so I've had it for quite a while, finally getting a chance to use it. And this particular bead is roughly 7 by 10 millimeters, so it's 7 millimeters that direction and 10 millimeters that direction, going that way. And it's got a fairly large hole in it, so it'll definitely be able to take all of our cord that we're going to be passing through it. And then we've got these nice little metal beads with the wind swirls on it. And these beads it's a 10 millimeter bead. And again, it's got a good size hole, so it's going to be able to handle the cord that we'll be passing through it as well. So I'm just going to set those aside, and we're going to start by getting so this is wax linen, and this is just the natural wax linen. No, it's not the bleached or the black, obviously not the black, but this is just the natural, it's undyed. And so I've got two pieces of it. One piece, the longer piece, is about 6 feet. The shorter piece is about 2 feet long. And we're going to start by actually getting our cord onto our button. I find it easier when you're doing a button closure to actually start at the button end for attaching our cord. So once we get the cord strung through, then we just need to identify which cord we're working with. This one first. We're going to balance our cords out to where we're centering them. Alright, so this cord in my left hand is the longer cord, so I'm looking for the other end of it. There we go. There's the other end. So just holding on to the the button, and I'm just going to keep pulling it through until we wind up to where the button is at the center of our cord. Alright, so now that we've got the big one done, we're going to do the same thing for our short cord. We're going to find the other end, match up our two ends, and just pull through until everything is all nice and balanced. So that's it. Alright, and to secure our cord behind our button, I'm actually going to tie an overhand knot and get it up and tight and close to the button as possible. So let's go ahead and do that. The overhand knot. And now I'm going to work all of our cord through our knot. To get it up tight and close to our button as possible. There we go. I'm just rotating it around until I can And I'm pushing and getting that button nice and tight with that overhand knot. And there we go. Got it up against the button, all nice and tight. And now it's just a matter of sorting out between the long and the short cords. These are our short cords, these are the, and then I have the long cords off to the side. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to drive a pin right through our cord, right below the button and above the overhand knot. And now I'm going to go ahead and tie our first 5 square knots. Alright, so there's our first 5 square knots. And what I want to do now is I want to be start adding our beads. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to add, let's see, I'm going to add our first 4 beads. The reason I'm not adding all 8 right now is because our center bead is actually going to go over the top of all cords. And because it's going to go over the top of all of our cords, we can't do the lower 4 beads yet. And I am going to just do a loose knot just to keep my beads from sliding off, but I'm not going to close it. I'm leaving it open because I definitely need to be able to open this up to get the rest of my beads on later on. Okay, so I'm going to slide up our first metal bead. And now we're going to do the left hand square knot, and it's actually, we only want to go for about 1/2 inch. So let's see how many we get on here to create the spiral effect that we want here. So again, we're just doing the left hand 1/2 square knot so we can do a spiral. Again, we're not actually counting how many knots we're adding on here because it's not about the number of knots, it's about the spiral shape, which is what we're going for. So as the spiral starts taking shape, it is fighting me a little bit on holding my cord oriented in a way to where I can continue to tie the knot. And there'll be a certain point where actually I have to flip the cord and tie from the other direction. It's almost there. So I think one more knot, and I think that's good. Let's see what the length is on that. And it's roughly 1/2 inch. So now we want to do 5 square knots. Actually, we want to bring up another bead because we want beads on both sides of our spiral. And now we do another 5 square knots. And 5. Now we're going to slide up another bead. And this time we're going to do the right hand 1/2 square knot to get our spiral to go the other direction. And actually, that looks pretty well completed. The spiral goes all the way around to the right. So I'm going to bring up our next bead and we're going to do 5 square knots. And 5. And because now we want to get our large bead on, we're going to have to undo this little loop knot here. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with our longer cords. It's a bit further distance to travel for our bead. And now I'm going to put through our shorter cords. Bring our bead up into position. So the bead rests just perfectly right up against that last square knot. So before we start tying the rest of our knots here, I'm going to take the time to string our last 4 beads, because what these will do is they'll help us with the gravity and holding our center cords straight for us so we don't have to fight them so much. And so we don't have to worry about trying to pin them down on anything to keep them straight while we're working the rest of our piece. Alright. I'll just tie a loose loop right there, and that's going to keep our beads from sliding off our cord while we're working. Alright, so the gravity created by those beads will help us. What I need to do is move our piece up a little further on the cork board, just so I can keep everything in camera for y'all. So now we're going to do another 5 square knots, and we're wanting this one to rest right up against the bottom of our center bead, and we don't want to pull it so tight to where it's going to wind up slipping up inside of our bead. We want to keep it just a little bit bigger than the opening in our bead, just to help control where it's at so it doesn't move around on us. Basically, the rest of this is going to be a repeat of what was on the first half. Alright, so I'll be back in just a little bit and I'll show you how we're going to finish this one off with doing its... What I'll do is, once I finish these square knots here, I'll be braiding the cord to create the loop, and I'll come back after I get the braid done. Okay, so I've finished the knots, and actually I made my braid. So this braid is roughly 1.25 inches long, and what I'm going to do is I'm bending it back over the top of the square knots, and to secure it in place so I don't have any slippage back and forth, I'm actually going to just tie just a bit of a overhand knot right there, and a matching one on this side. That way I know everything is going to stay where it's supposed to stay, and then I can do the final set of square knots that I want to add to this piece. Because right now the biggest thing is to make sure that my loop is secure where it's at. And just as a double check, because I did check it a little bit ago while I was off camera still, that my button will slide through that loop without a problem. So that's good. So I know my loop is a good size. So again, I've got the whole piece turned backwards. These are my center cords. They're laying over the top of these last 5 square knots that I previously did. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do at least 3 square knots over the top. We'll see how that looks, and we'll decide if I want to keep going or not. Alright, and I am pulling this really tight, so the profile of these square knots over the top of the previous square knots, that it doesn't show as something huge and bulky, that it's basically going to blend in at the end of the bracelet. Even though this part will be on the underside of your wrist when you're wearing the bracelet, it's still always a good idea to try to be as neat and tidy as possible. Right, at this point I'm going to trim off these two excess center cords because these are secure. They're not going anywhere, so I don't have to worry about them anymore. So I'm just going to trim off their excess, and I'm going to continue to tie another square knot just to cover up that little bit. So three is a good number, and that's as far as those extra square knots are going to be. So now I'm going to embed these tails through the remaining knots here and down through this bead. And because this is wax linen, it holds on to itself really well, so there's no burning or anything you need to do for finishing off these ends. So the wax linen really holds its own shape. So what I'm doing is I'm splicing down through this remaining square knot. There's actually two square knots here. I'm working from the back. So I'm just working to get my needle in between those knots and through that bead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pliers to grab hold of my needle and finish pulling it through. Okay. Now I'm going to go after the remaining cord. Alrighty. So I'm just going to trim off the excess. And there you have it. That's our fourth bracelet in this set. And let's bring them all back and look at them together. So this is just a simple square knot and spiral knot bracelet with a button and loop closure. So that works out just perfect. So that's nice. And then we had our Nordic inspired braid with the square knots to where they're spaced out to where it looks like stitching from something medieval or Nordic, and its closure is a Turk's head knot. Our next bracelet was this one with the green feather beads, and again square knot and spiral knots along with a lot of braiding. So that one came out really cute. I like the way using the two buttons, shank buttons back to back, creates that almost like a little drum barrel sort of look to it. So I like the way that one came out. And then our final one, this is actually a wrap. So this will go around your wrist twice. And so it's just simple that it's the almost sea glass looking green beads with the square knots. And it's a really simple one as well. So there you have it. set of 4 simple macrame bracelets. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please like and subscribe to my channel, and let me see what you make and how you interpret these, and you know, the color combinations and material combinations that you use. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again later.